I hate this show. I hate this show so much. But not because it's awful. Not because it's awful. But because some of it's awful, some of it's and some of it is phenomenal. They do some really cool stuff in this series. It just leaves me sitting there saying, why wasn't all of this like this, right? And that in itself makes it worse for me, personally, at least. I hate the Avatar movie. It's awful. It's not good. Blah, 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 blah. Everyone's talked it to death. But at least it was consistently bad, you know? So I could just sit and hate it. I'm not sitting there watching scenes being like, wow, this is amazing. And then going to the next scene thinking, this is awful. Anyway, we're talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender today. And look, Azula came to see us. How fitting. I knew that I wasn't going to love this series because Avatar: The Last Airbender, the original animated series, is my favorite television show of all time. And I don't mean that as just like, oh, it's definitely up there, like top 5 or whatever, like 100% favorite series of all time. Over Game of Thrones, over Attack on Titan, over, I don't know, I can't think of any other really good shows off the top of my head right now, but Avatar's it. And it probably will always be my favorite series, I think, for the rest of my life. So I went in with pretty low expectations, because how are you going to capture that magic again? But I was excited for the series, if that makes sense. Man, am I just left so conflicted about this show. Let's talk about the good first, because it's, I hate to say it, gonna be shorter than the rest, but this show does some really cool stuff with the characters that we didn't really get to see in the original animated series. And the best and my favorite example of this is the funeral scene, where we get to see Zuko and Iroh interacting together, and that was just such a powerful moment, and I loved that so much. Or the change that Zuko's crew was the 41st, I think, Corp, is that, or unit, whatever it was, and he saved them from that attack. That was such a good change. That was phenomenal. And then there were other things like the bending visually looked really good. Overall, wasn't 100% perfect, but I think they did really good with it. And the costumes looked amazing. The sets looked good. Most of the CGI, I think, looked good. It definitely was a TV budget, but I think they did really good with what they had. Then there are other little moments like Pakku asking Aang to lead their attack force against the Firebenders. And it was just such a cool moment because it showed that Pakku respected Aang as the Avatar over his age, if that makes sense. And I will say, like, overarching story narrative-wise, it does follow a very similar flow to the original series, which is nice. And a lot of the changes, I think, made sense with the time that they had available, like combining Jet and King Boomy and the Northern Air Temple all together in one episode or 2 episodes made sense. I understand why they put them like that, but it does also make the world feel a little smaller. Oh, choreography also was just really, really good. Yeah, I'm sorry, besties. I'm gonna get into the negative. I'm sure there's other positive things I want to talk about, but like, I need to start vomiting this information out, and I apologize. This show felt so rushed. It felt so rushed. So essentially, runtime is pretty similar to the original animated series. So I felt really confident that they were going to be able to tell this story well, and they just didn't. They just didn't. And why? Because they randomly brought in plot points from season 2 to season 1, and also gave a lot more screen time to Azula and Ozai, which, on one hand, I think some of the scenes were really good. Like, I genuinely enjoyed all of the scenes that we got together with them, but it took up runtime that needed to go towards the original cast and developing that relationship and their stories and the journey that they're going on. We spent so much time with Ozai and Azula, and I know a lot of people have made the complaint that it would have been nice to see them in season 1, but there's a reason that we didn't. Because the original creators were taking their time to develop the gang, who they are, and how they relate to each other. They were taking the time for Aang to learn waterbending. They were taking the time to establish Zuko as a main character, antagonist, future protagonist. And I really think adding so much time for Azula and Ozai really hurt the pacing of this show. But then also there are weird plot points from season 2 that comes in, like the Cave of Two Lovers. That did not need to be there. Like, we are already compressing Jet, Omashu, and the Northern Air Temple into a mesh of one story. Oh, and also, let's just randomly throw in an episode from season 2 in here. Why? Why? But then that was the biggest thing, but that wasn't even the only one. Like, Spirited essentially was a very similar plot to the swamp, of them going through the swamp. Katara sees her mother, Sokka sees Yue. Obviously it's not one for one, but like the whole time I was sitting there thinking, are they just doing the swamp right now? And then also we get the owl demon whose name I don't remember off the top of my head. I apologize. I swear I'm a real fan. I watch Avatar: The Last Airbender every single year. I just haven't done it yet this year, but I'll get to it. And his fox demons too. And that's like, again, just another small thing from season 2 that they brought in that I felt like was kind of weird. And then they also brought in stuff from Legend of Korra with the fog, and then they brought in some stuff from the comics with the totem that Aang goes and gets. And while on one hand I think all of these things are cool and was nice to see, it took away screen time from actual season 1, if that makes sense. And that really hurt the pacing of the show. Like, it takes them months to get from the southern water tribe to the northern water tribe. In the original animated series, you could really tell that passage of time. It really feels like a quick trip between the two, if that makes sense. And like, even at the northern water tribe, like, they're there a couple days maybe before the Fire Nation gets there. And, you know, you could say, well, they only had 2 episodes. I'm pretty sure the original animated series only had 2 episodes too, and just pacing-wise was just so much better. And again, the whole sense of passage of time, you know, we get Katara fighting Paku, and he agrees to bring her on as a student, and then the next episode starts, and they'd made it very clear that they'd been training for a while. I don't think they specify exactly how long, but you get the sense that time has passed. They didn't just get to the Northern Water Tribe and then the Fire Nation attack right away, you know? And then, I'm sorry, but this is literally Avatar Book 1, Water, and we don't see him water bend once outside of his whole Koizilla ocean spirit avatar state monster, which visually looked stunning, I think. Except for the fact that it roared a lot. Go back and rewatch that scene. It roars so many times. It felt a little unnecessary by the end. But how? Like, this makes me so genuinely upset that they just completely removed Aang studying waterbending. And I don't know why. Maybe they've put out a statement on why they've done it. My guess is that they wanted to focus on Katara as a waterbender, which is cool, but also the original series focused on both of them as waterbenders and made it work. And there was some rivalry between them just a little bit. You know, Katara was jealous of Aang because of his natural talent, being obviously the Avatar. And it just blows my mind that they completely removed that aspect of the story. And I'm guessing they're just going to be like, oh yeah, in between season 1 and season 2, Katara taught Aang how to waterbend. That's my guess. And honestly, it's the better of the 2 options. But that is my guess. But it's still gonna really piss me off, I'm not gonna lie. Because the whole point of, like, the first half of the second season is Aang moving on to find an earthbending teacher, and it's just weird now that we can't move to this major plot point of the second season at the start of the second season because they completely skipped Aang training this time, you know? And then talking about important stuff from season 2, the library. I've seen people theorizing, and I'm really hoping this isn't true, that because we got to see the owl bird creature again, I'm sorry, that we saw him here was a hint that they wanted to show him off because they're not going to be putting him in season 2, which would just be a bafflingly stupid decision, okay? When I first heard that, I was like, oh yeah, the library, it's not that important of an episode. I guess if they cut it out, they cut it out. And then I started to think about what actually happens in the library. Appa goes missing. That's a major plot point. And then they found out about the Day of Black Sun, which, you know, pushes the second half of the series plot forward. You know, they want to go to Ba Sing Se, one, to tell the Earth King about the Day of Black Sun, but also to look for Appa, which takes them to Ba Sing Se. And then everything in Ba Sing Se happens with them having to take down the Dai Li and then convincing the Earth King to help. And then Azula takes over the Earth Kingdom. And then obviously into season 3, where they have to then change the plan so that they could invade the Fire Nation capital in time. So much of the plot sits on the library. If they don't include the library, they're going to have these things happen somewhere else. And it's just like, why though? Why though? Anyway, that's a long tangent about something we don't even know if it's going to happen. I've seen it theorized and it's got me worried. Capital City. I hate that it's just Capital City. And every time somebody's like, I'm going to go to Capital City, and when I return to Capital City, it just pissed me off so much because it just sounded so cringe. Like, literally all they had to say is the capital. Like, if they didn't want to give the capital an actual real name, they could have just said, when I get back to the capital. Like, that sounds so much better. It reminds me of the Halo series, where there are already established cities on Reach, but then they just create this really cringe Reach City Reach. Let's talk about the Air Nomad genocide, okay? Because that scene added, I don't think, anything to the series, if I'm being honest. It's not a scene that we needed, and I think it was just a scene that they added to look visually cool, which morally I feel weird about because, like, yeah, it was a cool fight scene, but also, like, it was a genocide, you know? So I don't know how I feel about that. But then it was also so cringe because it was like, oh yeah, all the air nomads everywhere are going to be in this one location. How convenient for the Fire Nation. I don't know, like, it made the Fire Nation look a lot weaker than what it is, knowing that they just attacked one location, then having coordinated this major assault on all the major air nomad temples, and then also their whole campaign to hunt down any other air nomad survivors that happened after. Like, it was just really in depth, and it just got dumbed down to, oh yeah, all the airbenders are in this one location. Good luck, Fire Lord Sozin. And then also the firebending amp that they got from Sozin's Comet just was not that visually good. Like, there were a couple wide shots where there were these massive fireballs flying and hitting the temple, and I was like, yeah, that is Sozin's Comet. And then everything else is just kind of like, meh. It's just, I literally, like, if you'd have showed me that scene and I didn't know it was during Sozin's Comet, I wouldn't have thought there was any power difference between any other scene with the actual firebenders throughout the rest of the show. And this show suffers really bad from telling instead of showing. And so, like, instead of showing us, like, oh yeah, the firebenders have these massive giant blasts of fire that are just burning air nomads, they just have Sozin say, if this were any other night, you may have won, but not tonight because we are so strong. And obviously it wasn't that bad, but it felt that cringe. Also, Sozin, I despised Sozin's character. He just felt like such a cartoony bad guy, which is such a funny thing to say, saying originally was shown off in a cartoon, but Sozin had so much depth in the original series, and maybe they'll flesh him out more, but this man was menacing and cruel. But at the same time, I got the sense in the animated series that he genuinely believed that he was in the right, and he genuinely believed that the world would be better if the Fire Nation ruled all the four nations. It wasn't just oh yeah, I think I'm gonna go capture and take over the world now, because that sounds fun. Like, I don't know, the original was just so menacing, and this version was just so cartoony. Again, I know it's a funny way to phrase it, but I really did not like Sozin's portrayal in this one. Talking about portrayals, Boomy also, I think, really suffered. I know some people like it. I thought it was a weird change that he'd given up and actually was an antagonist in the series. Like, yes, in the original animated series, he portrays himself as an antagonist to Aang, and then he makes Aang solve all these puzzles, and then it's revealed that he's actually Boomy, and it's this really heartwarming scene. And in this one, he's just this jaded king who's given up hope, and that is far less interesting to me. Like, I kept waiting for Boomy to be like, haha, just kidding, I'm just messing with you because I'm your friend, ha ha ha. Nope, he was serious. He genuinely had given up and was all jaded, and it just didn't feel like Boomy, right? And then Roku, too, became this, like, funny haha comedy guy, and I'm pretty sure at some point they even mentioned Roku being a pacifist. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm thinking of a YouTuber that I was listening talk about Roku, and maybe they didn't understand his character, but I'm pretty sure it was this series. And it just, again, just a character assassination of this really cool character being just turned into a goofball. It felt like Roku was more like Boomy, and Boomy was more like... well, maybe not. Roku didn't really give up hope, but Roku definitely seemed a lot more like Boomy than Boomy did. And I don't know, I thought it was really cool that we got to see Kyoshi and Kurok, but showing them really took away from Avatar Roku, especially considered the fact that the only reason we actually got to see Avatar Roku was because Aang needed a MacGuffin. And it's so frustrating because, again, it was so cool to see Kyoshi, and she killed it in that scene, the actress, and how they did everything. Roku is Avatar's spiritual guide, and I just hated seeing how they portrayed him here as this funny, silly, haha guy, and that his inclusion in the plot wasn't even important. It was just a MacGuffin that was there to be a MacGuffin. And then, sorry, I'm going to keep going off on these. I had mixed feelings about Zhao. I liked this version of Zhao, but he definitely was not animated series Zhao. He was a lot more manipulative and, I want to say, slimy, if that makes sense. But I don't think that was bad, especially with the whole, like, I'm going to become the Fire Lord, and I'm doing this to increase my status, and we get to see him go from this unknown commander to admiral of a fleet to having the ambition to becoming the Fire Lord, and I thought that was really cool. But it was different. It was different. Different doesn't mean bad. I'm still deciding how I feel about it. And then, I think lastly on character assassination that I really want to talk about is Katara. Oh, wait, no. We'll talk about Sokka's sexism too. They really screwed up Katara. And I just want to be clear, none of this hate is going towards the actress. I think she did a phenomenal job with what she was given. The script and the showrunner and the directors, I don't even know exactly who to blame, but it just made Katara so bland. And the animated Katara had so much character and was such an important part of the plot. And this is what I was talking about, the show feeling rushed, adding all these other things, is it took away time from Katara and Sokka and Aang and their relationship and their character development, and kind of makes it feel like they weren't even that needed. I don't know. I'm going to watch it again before I settle on that whole thought process there, but I really think they screwed up Katara a lot, and I hope going forward that they'll try and bring back some of original animated series Katara back. And then onto Sokka's sexism, I'm sorry, I really think it was a bad call taking that out of his character development. And I know the argument is, oh, this is made for a modern audience, but just because we're living in a more modern world that's more civilized, more politically correct, doesn't mean everyone is. There are still young boys right now who are struggling with sexist thoughts and ideologies that need to see Sokka's character development. When I grew up, I got to grow up with original Sokka, and And his character arc was very influential on me as a young man. And I think there are young men that need to see this. And yes, of course, they can watch the original series. But this was an opportunity for these showrunners to give young people that story and that positive influence. People grow and change and get better. And that is real. People being perfect from the get-go, that is not real. And I really think it hurt the show. On the other hand, I am really happy that they kept the whole Paku, Northern Water Tribe doesn't let women fight thing. I'm glad that they kept the Katara fight. I think that's a super important moment for her. But I don't know. Again, with the whole Katara not really feeling a Katara thing, that moment just didn't feel the same. Like, in the original animated series, there's just this, even though Katara lost, there's just so much, there's this air of victory because she got to stick it to Paku, and it just wasn't here. And I think it was partly because of the condensed plot, because we didn't just get to see Paku saying, oh, yeah, we don't let women fight, and then Katara's like, okay, well, I'm gonna go fight him to prove we can fight. In the original series, there were some extra scenes of Paku training Aang, and then Aang training Katara in secret, and then them getting caught, and it just kind of pushes that narrative a little farther, and it makes that moment where she finally does fight back feel so much more epic, victorious. I don't know. Other characters that they introduced that maybe they probably shouldn't have was Mai and Ty Lee. Honestly, they didn't serve any purpose in this series, and I kind of felt that way with Katara and Sokka, but obviously they still played a large role in the series, but literally no reason for them to be there besides to talk to Azula. And it should have been the twins. It should have been the elderly twins that train Azula. They could have done exactly the same thing as Mai and Ty Lee, and it would have been fine. But now we have them just already there, which means they're going to completely skip over Azula recruiting them. Again, I kind of get it. Like, they're trying to save as much time as possible because they're at a condensed runtime. Barely, but a condensed runtime. But that is such an important couple of scenes where Azula manipulates Mai and Ty Lee into joining her, and it shows just how evil of a person Azula is. And we're just not going to get that because, oh, look, they're already here. And it's even more frustrating because, like, yes, they're taking that scene out, but what they replaced it with is just fundamentally worse because they don't really get to do anything. They're just there, you know, instead of getting their introduction with this whole Azula manipulative plotline. Oh, but what I will say is stop body shaming these children. I can't believe I even have to say this. Y'all are so evil sometimes. Like, I get it. This show doesn't live up to the hype of the original, but that is no excuse to body shame these literal 2 children, okay? Anyway, now that we're past that, Azula. I don't know. She's just not as evil as original animated series Azula, and they're showing that she's kind of crazy a little too soon. Like, Azula goes from this cold, calculated person to this absolute crazy person by the end, and it's this character arc of, you know, learning so much about her and what happened between her mother and her father's expectations, the expectations of the nation, and it's a lot to get from A to Z, and it just kind of feels like we're already there at crazy Azula, if that makes sense. Not quite, but close, you know? Why did we have an off-brand? Long ago, the 4 nations lived in peace. In the beginning, if Gran was just going to say it word for word later, I was so mad when I saw that because it was just so cringe. The original version, it reminded me of the, hey, can I copy your homework? Yeah, but just change things a little bit. Like, it was so close to the original, but also so different. It was jarring. And then they just did the original line for line anyway. It was just really cringe having it read or presented that way. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm looking through my notes from episode by episode. A line that I loved that broke my heart is there may come a day when you wished you'd spent more time with your teachers. Oh, had me crying. Such a good line. Oh, I also really liked the change where Monk Gyatso told Aang in private that he was the Avatar. That felt just a lot more personal. That was really good. Oh, okay, back to bad. Sorry, I'm reading through my notes, just making sure I got everything. Aang being bullied for being so much better than everyone else was really pivotal to why he ran away and why he doesn't want to be the Avatar. And we just don't get to see any of that, except for the one scene where he like almost pushes 2 kids off a cliff, which brutal, but there's not really any of that there. And so when Aang's like, I don't want to be the Avatar, I don't want to be special, it doesn't make sense. In the original series, it makes sense because he was getting bullied for being special. And then that even got worse after it was discovered he was the Avatar. And so it made sense, you know, and then we lose the whole him getting sent away from Monk Gyatso thing. And there was a lot of depth to him running away, and they just completely take that away. And then on top of that, they give us a super cringe, I just want to stay and goof around with my friends telling instead of showing. And I don't know. It's decisions like that that really, really hurt this show for me. Back to the Airman genocide, the audience learning about it at the same time as Aang in the original series really worked because we could go through those emotions together. And not necessarily that it was a bad decision in the live action series, but I just don't think it was presented as well. Saying we learn about it at a different time than Aang, if that makes sense. The he looks dead, what is that mark on his head line? I thought was really funny. I like that. Oh yeah, and then Aang at the end of the first episode, or maybe the second, yeah, at the end of the first episode, is just like, yeah, I accept being the Avatar. Like this huge major character arc from the entire series just is like, oh yeah, I accept being the Avatar. And then his character arc then gets changed to him having to do hard things, like, you know, fighting against the Fire Nation, or, you know, walking away from his friends to do what he needs to do, blah, blah, blah. Like, he still has a character arc, but it just doesn't flow as well. Oh, the book made me so mad. Zuko's Avatar book, really, it was just an exposition device. And in the original show, Aang already knows this stuff because he was a monk that was trained by monks who knew he was the Avatar and who probably did try and teach him things. I'm sure they taught all their students about the Avatar and how the Avatar needed to be honored and the history of the Avatar and blah, 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 blah. But you can't tell me that they weren't specifically making sure Aang was learning this information knowing that he was the Avatar, right? So it makes sense that Aang already knows all this stuff. Take that knowledge away from him and then to just add an exposition device felt so cheap, so bland. I'm okay with them getting rid of the pirate plot line and then Katara just getting the water scroll. I think that's totally fine. But it was weird that they mentioned the pirate plot later. I don't know. It felt weird because I really liked when they did that, when they referenced the Great Divide and the pirates. That, I think, was the one scene that really helped kind of make it feel like time was actually passing because, oh, okay, the characters are going on an adventure that we're not seeing. Like, we're not seeing everything that's happening. But it was weird that they chose the pirate run, even though they specifically cut that plot out of the story, when there were other ones that they could have added. I don't know. Again, not added into the story, but, like, they could have said, that's what the Canyon Guide said, and, oh, the fortune teller also mentioned that, something like that. I've been reading through my notes episode by episode, trying to hit all the points I wanted to talk about, but I'm pissed again. I gotta calm down. I was here, I'm back up here now. Again, the whole rushing the storyline makes me so upset because we lose out on the Earth Kingdom prisoners and the Zhang Zhang storyline. Both super good stories that, okay, maybe the Earth Kingdom prisoner storyline wasn't pivotal to the plot, but I would have much rather have seen that than a season 2 plot line. But then also the Zhang Zhang storyline. Like, we get that there's resistance in capital city capital, but we don't get to see Zhang Zhang. And, like, again, it really bothers me that there's a resistance in the capital. Like, The Fire Nation propaganda was good, right? And we get to see that in season 3, but establishing already in season 1 that there's a resistance in the capital, I don't know, it just felt weird to me. Maybe it'll all work out, maybe not, I don't know. But then they cut out the actual resistance from the original series, and one of the coolest characters in Zhang, I don't know, it feels weird. Again, was my whole point about earlier of them like adding in stuff about Azula and Ozai in season 2. It took away from these really cool moments that we could have had. I would have much rather had the screen time that went to that go to actually telling season 1's actual story. I have so many feelings. The line, "That's his real power" connection, super cringe. Suki's mom not trusting Aang felt a little weird. You know, I mean, the original residents of Kyoshi Island were so happy to have Aang there. And so it was such a weird switch for the leader to be like, nah, actually, no, you can't be here, but I don't know. It just felt weird. Oh, and then like the only CGI that really genuinely bothered me in the entire series was when this lady like grabs a Fire Nation soldier and like flips him and throws him into the crowd of soldiers, and it's like super sped up. It looked really, really bad. I think it would have looked a lot better if she would have just like flipped him onto the ground in front of her. I don't know. I get that they're trying to establish that the non-benders are really strong too, but they don't have super strength, you know? They're amazing with what they do. Like Sokka, Suki, Zahir, before he became a Airbender, Ty Lee, May, like these non-benders are amazing. And I don't think they need super strength to actually be amazing, if that makes sense. And then we never actually get to see someone have a feat like that again. I don't know. It was weird. But like I said, it was the only CGI that genuinely bothered me. Editor Elijah here. Sokka getting Suki's fan had absolutely zero payoff in this season. Now, we might get to see something revolving around it in season 2 or season 3, but until we actually get that, it just feels like wasted space and wasted time. Oh, back to character stuff. Appa and Momo. Appa and Momo are not really important. Obviously, they're their ride, and they're cute, and they're adorable, whatever, but they lost a lot of their character that they had from the original series, which is understandable, right? It must have been super expensive to have Appa there, and probably Momo too, but maybe not as much, saying he isn't so, nobody's riding Momo. I felt nothing for them. Like, when Momo almost died in the last episode, I was sad because I knew Momo in the original animated series. I think if I'd never seen the original animated series, I probably would have been sad in the sense of like, oh, that cute animal almost died, but there was really no emotional connection to either of them. And this series treated Appa and Momo as pets, while the original series treated Appa and Momo as actual characters. Again, it's just something that leaves me feeling disappointed. Oh yeah, and then Kyoshi is kind of a dick to Aang. The more I talk about it, like, the more I just don't think the showrunner understood the heart of this series. Like, I've seen some people say that this has the spirit of the original animated series, and that this is a love letter to the original animated series, and I disagree. I really do. And it scenes like this with Kyoshi that just show that they don't understand these characters. Kyoshi was this awesome, super cool character, but she wasn't this like cruel, mean, angry lady that she got portrayed in the series. Like, yes, a lot of fans like to make jokes about Kyoshi and how cruel she can be, but that's fan jokes, not the actual Kyoshi. And I genuinely think that somebody went online, looked up Avatar Kyoshi, and watched some joke videos about her being cruel or the most powerful avatar, blah, 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 whatever, and based Kyoshi on that and not actual Kyoshi. Because, like, you guys know what I'm talking about. All those memes of, like, Aang going into the Avatar state, and then like Kyoshi taking over and being the one to do all the fighting because she's her, right? Which is fun fan stuff and is in line with Kyoshi as a character, but Kyoshi is a lot more calculated, a lot more subtle. Yes, she will kill a guy if she needs to, and she's so powerful that she can separate chunks of land and create this Kyoshi Island. But she was just kind of mean here. I just didn't feel like that was Kyoshi. And it really bothered me because she was yelling at Aang. Like, she told him, if you run away again, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, but Aang never ran away. Aang didn't run away this time. He literally was just like, I need to go on a flight to go clear my head. A totally normal thing for people to do. And then everything went wrong. And, like, some of the other characters yelling at Aang and making him feel bad about it, okay, that makes sense. They don't know the whole context. But you can't tell me that Kyoshi didn't know the full context. I don't know. It's like they had Aang not run away, but then still incorporated plot lines of Aang dealing with the fact that he ran away, and it was so weird, and I don't know, I didn't like it, I'm sorry. Oh, and then they changed why Aang went to the North Pole? Why? I may have already vented about this, I'm sorry. I'm an hour into my recording, and only on episode 3 on my notes. There was literally no reason to change this. It makes no sense why they made this change. And I guess maybe saying Aang never practiced waterbending, if they were never going to... Okay, it makes sense why they made this change. Let me rephrase how I'm going to say this. Now that I've seen the whole series and we know that Aang never waterbends, I guess it does make sense why they changed the reason he went to the Northern Air Temple. The Northern Water Tribe. But that doesn't mean it's good. It was a stupid decision. Not having the Avatar Fire Waterbend the entire time was stupid. And changing the reason he went to the Northern Water Tribe was stupid. I'm sorry. They just didn't understand this series. Okay, on to Azula. As much as I hate the Resistance being in Capital City instead of Zhangzhang, I do think Azula tricking the traitors and the Resistance was very on brand for her. Zhao failing his officer training 3 times I thought was a weird choice. Then on to episode 3 and 4. I've already talked about it a little bit. I understand why they made a lot of changes they did. It was interesting how it all played out with Zuko using Firebending against Aang in Omashu, and then Iroh sacrificing himself and like pretending to be the one to have firebended in the city so that Zuko could escape. So on brand for Iroh. I loved that so much. Such a good uncle. I already talked about Cave of Two Lovers. King Boomy's speech, again, really bothered me. And what bothered me the most about this is that there's this super, like, slow-mo shot of Katara freezing the ground. And Sokka slides across it, and he grabs King Boomy. And Katara's like, Aang, you can let go of the boulders. And then Aang moves both boulders, not just the one above him. He moves both of them, and I'm just sitting there like, okay, so he literally could have moved both of them anyway already. Why? Where was the tension? Where was the trauma? He could have just done this the whole time already. I don't know. It bothers me. On to episode 5, Ozai praising Zuko really threw me for a loop, but now that I know that he's specifically doing it to manipulate Azula, I thought that was interesting. Again, I genuinely do like the whole Azula, Ozai stuff that they added, but it just wasn't worth taking away from actual Season 1 storylines. I'm going to repeat that over and over again until I die. I have one note that just says, why? And I don't remember what that's for. But I was upset about something. Ko, the face stealer, I've talked about the demons, the spirits a little bit. I get why they moved him here. I still would have preferred him in where he was in the original series. I hated, though, that they showed actual motion around him and he didn't steal their face. I hated that he trapped Katara, Sokka, and all these random villagers to eat them, but didn't eat any of them. I mean, he ate one, but I don't think that person was important. Like, when they brought the villagers back to the village, there was never a line about, we couldn't save all of them. Like, I just think that was a totally different dude, but I could be wrong. I hated the MacGuffin device. I don't know, it just felt weird that they put all of the spirits that Aang ever meets, like, in this episode. Heibai, we never get to see Panda Heibai. You have no idea how excited I was to see Panda Heibai. I know he's just a panda, but he's a big panda. He's cute. And they took that from me, and I will never forgive them. Oh, little things too, like Roku's page was marked, like literally was bookmarked when Aang pulled the book out, and it just felt a little convenient. Just little details like that. Monk Gyatso, this was another scene that I adore. I adore this scene. I wish this had been in the original. Like, Aang getting to see Monk Gyatso again was just so sweet. I didn't understand why he just wasn't there anymore. Like, I knew that they wanted to make the audience hurt and feel pain, which I did when Aang went back and he wasn't there. But I don't know. I just don't see a good reason on why he wasn't there, aside from the fact that the showrunners wanted us to feel sad. I wish there would have been some more explanation there. Also, at the end of this episode, he has a really weird kind of exposition-y dialogue dump, and then Iroh has a weird exposition-y dialogue dump at the next episode. I don't know. Again, it just felt weird and out of place. I did think Ozai putting Zhao in charge of the hunt for the Avatar did feel a little weird after him praising Zuko about finding the Avatar. Again, I know he's just trying to manipulate Azula, but it just felt weird. It felt weird. Here's another note that I hate myself for. I literally just wrote "why" in all caps really long. I don't know what that's for, but I was upset about something. I think I already talked about it, but Zuko saving the 41st, phenomenal. One of the best changes in this series. And again, it's changes like this that make me hate this show even more, because they can clearly make good television, and they can clearly make good adaptations, and they can clearly like change things a little bit to enhance the original instead of hurting it. And yet they just don't for most of it. They just don't. I did make a note. We didn't see Aang practicing waterbending once before getting to the North Pole. And I really, like, my initial thought was like, that's so dumb that he didn't train at all, but at least he's in the North Pole now, like, he's gonna start training. Man, I was wrong. Also, how did Aang get his staff back? Because in the previous episode, sorry, I skipped over a lot. I'm just going through my notes. You know, he gets captured, he has a staff when he gets captured, him and Zuko escape together, and he very visually clearly does not have his staff, and then by episode 7 he has his staff. That I thought was just a little weird, just something they forgot. I didn't talk much about episode 6 because I actually really liked episode 6. I think they did the whole Blue Spirit arc and Aang getting captured and them escaping together really well. I think the expanded conversation between Aang and Zuko worked phenomenal. I thought that was another really great change. But yeah, I don't know. It was a good episode. Yeah, and I made another note once it got confirmed that Yue was who Sokka saw, that this was literally just the swamp episode from season 2. Sokka and Yue's relationship again feels really rushed, and it doesn't feel that bad in the original series because again, they're at I keep wanting to say Northern Air Temple, the Northern Water Tribe, for an undisclosed amount of time before the attack happens. Could be, again, they don't specify. Could have been days, could have been weeks, could have been months. Maybe they do specify. I don't remember. I should have watched this series again. I didn't watch the series before watching the live action series because I wanted to separate them as much as possible, which, yeah, literally. I'm an hour and 6 minutes into my recording, and I've done this much comparison. Imagine if I'd watched the original again. Imagine. But Yue and Sokka's relationship feels just so rushed here because they do only see each other for maybe a couple of days before it all goes wrong, you know? But I did like the fact that Yue had called off her engagement before Sokka came into the picture. It makes it always felt I always felt bad for her original fiance because Sokka just rolls up and steals his girl. So I think this is handled a little more mature. I like that Yue was a waterbender. I can't remember if she was in the original series or not, but it makes sense, obviously, having a part of the moon spirit inside of her that she could bend water. I thought it was adorable that she made ice cream for the kid and then shared it with I keep wanting to say Zuko. Sokka, such a cute couple. I really do like them together. I just wish they'd had more time to develop this relationship. And maybe they would have if they hadn't have included season 2 plot lines and random stuff that never happened in the original series. They call Aang out and literally say, hey, it would have been wise for you to practice waterbending. And I literally screamed at the TV, that's what I've been saying this whole time! It's like the showrunners knew. They knew and they were just throwing it in our face. Also, Yue is also a bridge to the spirit world now. It kind of makes sense, but also I hate it. It makes sense, but I hate it. What more can I say? The whole Ice Moon thing was super cringe. Like, oh, these spirits only come once a day. Blah, 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 blah. It was super exposition-y. And they changed it. They literally changed the spirits being there all the time to being there once a year. Just so they could add more exposition. And for why? Right? It didn't add anything to the story but exposition. Zhao didn't learn about them from the library, which also makes me worried that they're not going to show the library, because that was a big plot point in the libraries. Zhao burned down a lot of the whole like Fire Nation section so that his enemies couldn't learn anything against them. And that's what pissed off the library spirit Owlman. I don't know. So it just felt weird that he learned from this random fire sage about it. And then, like, at the same time, this fire sage is at Roku's temple, but then also with Zhao went to him, but then also he goes and talks to the Fire Lord. I don't know. It just seemed weird. Like, why was this fire sage the one to tell Ozai that they lost in the water tribe? It just felt like they were like, oh, we don't really have anyone else, and we need this fire sage to tell Ozai that the Sozin's Comet's coming back. So I guess we'll also have him be like a military general giving a war report to the Fire Lord. It's whatever. No one will notice. No one will care. I care. Okay, I noticed. I care. The Avatar spirit is great, but it pales in comparison to the power of the elemental spirits. This one again felt really weird. It's things like this, like, that make me feel like they didn't look into other Avatar media, like The Legend of Korra, the comics, the books, blah, 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 blah. But then obviously they include things from them, which makes me feel like they did look into it. And it's so confusing. Like, the library, to me, the change of Zhao learning about it from a fire sage feels like they didn't really look into season 2 and were like, oh, how would he learn this information? I guess we'll just have a fire sage tell him. But then they do include the librarian. This whole comment about the elemental spirits makes it feel like they don't know about Rava and Vatu, but then they include the fog. What is it? I have it written down. The Fog of Lost Souls from Legend of Korra. So it's like, do you know about the extended universe or do you not? Like, Rava and Vatu are literally one of the most powerful spirits. And then she combined herself with the Avatar, who now has not only her and the current Avatar, but all of the avatars within them that have ever lived, making them a ridiculously powerful being. And so it's like, again, it just felt like a weird line. It just felt like somebody didn't really understand the story and the overarching narrative and the extended universe and lore and knowledge and history. And it was weird. It was weird. Then we get a direct line from the original series where Zuko says, "You found a master, haven't you?" And initially I was super angry. I was like, that line means nothing now, saying she never actually trained with Pakku. And then Katara has her line where she says, "I am my own master," or "I did, and it was me." And I think that was a really cool moment for Katara, but at the same time, it just felt empty because we didn't really get to see her training much. And a lot of what she learned, like, yes, she learned from the scroll, but she also, like, the show made it a point to say she learned some from Aang in the very beginning. He helped her kind of overcome and learn about bending just a little bit. And then the whole jet thing where he helped her overcome the trauma of her mother, and maybe to me, it came across like there was a traumatic block with that was stopping Katara from like truly accessing her powers. And once she was able to not necessarily let go of her mother, but to view her mother as more than just the day she died, that helped her with her bending. And so it just kind of felt empty. And like I said, Katara just feels not as great as of a character she did in the original show. And like, I think if Katara, original animated series Katara, never trained with Paku and then said that line to Zuko, I think it would have made way more sense because of the journey that we actually got to see her go on through the first season that we just don't really get here. How did Zhao know which one was the moon and which one was the ocean? He kind of just took a guess, right? Because the show established just a couple minutes earlier that he did not know what the spirits looked like and what form they would take. Right? Valid. Okay. A change, but okay. And then he's just like, oh, I found them. Let me grab this one random one and hope this is the right one. It just felt weird. And then Iroh says, I will do unto you whatever you do unto that fish. And then he just kind of stands there for a while. He just kind of stands there. And then even after Zhao runs off, he doesn't chase him. But in the original series, he came to help with UA and help bring the original spirit back and all that happened. So it's important that he stayed. In this one, he just kind of runs and finds Zuko. So that line just felt a lot less powerful. Kuruk's knife, just bringing in another MacGuffin device. It just felt weird. Again, especially knowing Legend of Korra and the lore of Wan in the first Avatar, or Wan, the first Avatar, and the turtles and the original bending and the spirits and the fighting that went on between them. And it's like, now none of that matters because you can only hurt a spirit if you have a special knife. Again, it just feels like they don't understand the larger universe of Avatar. Again, it's little changes like this that they didn't need to change it. There was literally no reason for them to add in a MacGuffin knife, or there was no reason for them to add that the spirits only come once a year, except for to add exposition, and it just felt weird. And then on that, they add this really weird line where we get our Koizilla Aang, and three times this show says, Aang has given up his spirit. He will never return. He is one with the ocean now. There is no more Avatar. Why? Literally 3 times they tell us this. Why? There was literally no need. Again, it wasn't in the original series. They added it just for extra drama. But then, at the same time, they just exposition dump. And on that, after the spirit gets stabbed and the waterbenders lose their waterbending, they're literally yelling, I can't bend! I can't bend! And the animated series handled this so much better because we literally see them fighting the firebenders with their water bending, and then the water just falls to the ground. And we as an audience understand, oh, they can't water bend. And so for them to just randomly yell, I can't bend, it just felt kind of, and the original series did have a lot of exposition, but let's be real, besties, there was also a lot of other stuff happening, so the exposition was kind of spread out a little better, and I think that helped with the flow. Also, Aang immediately, the Koizilla goes away, and then the ocean spirit is just immediately back in the koi pond. Just felt a little weird. Again, just one of those, visual things that I don't think they really caught. Okay, that's it. That's all my notes. This show was so confusing for me because, like I said, there was some stuff that they did that I really genuinely liked. The Monkiatsu thing, a lot of the stuff they did with Iroh and Zuko. Visually, it looked phenomenal. And then other characters, Katara just lost a lot of her personality, and they changed things that they didn't necessarily need to change. But then they also changed things that I felt were a very fair and valid thing to change, and I think made sense for why they would do that to make the story flow with the amount of episodes they had. But then, at the same time, they added other stuff that just didn't need to be in there, which took away from the runtime, which made the show feel rushed. And I don't know. I don't know how I feel. Because they did great on some stuff. And then other stuff, they just absolutely dropped the ball. And I just don't know how to feel because I want to hate this show so much because of the mistakes they made. But the choices they made that were good absolutely crushed it. Like, they weren't just mid. They weren't like, oh, I could deal with that. They were phenomenal changes. Phenomenal changes. Here's my hope, besties. Avatar: The Last Airbender original animated series, Book 1, Water, was the weakest series. I think most people probably agree on that. I know there's a lot of discourse online on what's better between Book 2 and Book 3. I personally am a Book 3 kind of a guy, but I've never seen someone actually say, actually, I think Book 1's the best. That doesn't mean they're not out there. My whole point to this, though, besties, is that is my hope for the live-action series. That Book 1 will be the worst of the 3, and that Book 2 will be better, and Book 3 will be the best, and it'll just every season get better and better and better, and they'll learn these characters, the showrunners, the actors, the writers, they will learn these characters better, and they will absolutely crush it moving forward. I genuinely am worried about the waterbending thing. I don't think they're going to be able to solve that well. I'm also kind of worried, like, going into season 2, are we going to get season 3 plot lines put in there for some weird reason? I don't know. And I'm kind of worried about how they're going to handle Toph too. Like, I don't know, just with how they've handled the main cast, I don't feel confident on how they're going to handle Toph, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm definitely excited for season 2. I'm excited for what they're going to do. I think that there's some room for improvement, but that they can improve. The moments that were really great gave me hope that if they can just keep all the moments like that or close to that, it's going to be great. Also, I didn't mention it, but like, man, was it crushing when the original showrunners left. And the whole time I was watching through this series, I was just sitting there thinking, yep, makes sense. That's why they left. That's why they left. I am sad for them because this was supposed to be it. This was supposed to really be their chance, and it's just not. And, like, Netflix, I think, is finally in the net positive where they're making money, and not only that, but they're making billions of dollars a year now. I'm just sitting there, like, they couldn't have even given these guys a couple more episodes, you know? I don't know. I'm so confused because I'm discouraged, but I was also so hyped during certain scenes, and I'm going to end this here, but let me know in the comments, what did you guys think? And if you made it all the way here, thank you so much. I know this was a long one and totally scattered and random, but I appreciate you sticking through this whole thing, and I will see you in the next one. Mother Goose out.